to convene the Senate Subcommittee on Surface Transportation and Merchant Marine Infrastructure Safety and Security for our third hearing entitled Surface Transportation Reauthorization, Oversight and Reform of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. I also would like to take a moment to note that this is our first official hearing with Senator Cory Booker as the subcommittee's ranking member. Welcome, Senator. It is just such a pleasure to have you as ranking member, and I look forward to working with you on these issues. Our nation's economy depends upon safe, timely, and efficient trucking. Nearly 500,000 truckers operate on America's roads today. From globally recognized companies to smaller owner-operators with a single truck, America's truckers move billions worth of goods and materials each year. Established in 2000, the Federal Motor Carrier Administration plays a vitally important role in promoting safety on our nation's roads. Along with many of my colleagues and the trucking industry, I share the FMCSA's commitment to increasing the safety of our nation's roads. We must never lose sight of this goal. At the same time, members of Congress, independent agencies, including the GAO, the NTSB, and the DOT Inspector General, and stakeholders have expressed serious concerns with the agency's flawed approach in a number of areas. Some of the FMCSA's actions over the past several years, however, challenge our shared goal of enhancing safety. For example, FMCSA issued the final 34-hour restart rule in 2013 with complete disregard for congressionally mandated requirements for the study on the rule's impact. When the study was eventually issued several months late, the sample size was not representative of this diverse industry. In addition, serious concerns were raised about the rule's perverse impact on safety, because in effect it pushed drivers onto the roads during workers, students, and families' morning's commute. In 2014, the GAO investigated the methodology behind FMCSA's compliance, safety, and accountability program. Inaccurate CSA scores, publicly available online, have cost company contracts and raised insurance rates. All of this has occurred without a clear correlation to increasing highway safety. When confronted with these findings, FMCSA completely disregarded GAO's recommendations. To address flaws in CSA's implementation, major stockholders, including law enforcement, requested that FMCSA remove CSA scores from the public view. As chairman of the subcommittee, I intend to author legislation to reform the FMCSA and ensure that the process is more inclusive of Congress and stakeholders. My efforts to reform the FMCSA's regulatory process will include two major principles. First, guidance review. FMCSA should complete a periodic review of its current technical and programmatic guidance and provide transparency to the public on this review. Second, regulatory framework going forward. FMCSA must conduct a more robust cost-benefit analysis that represents carriers from a wide variety of business models. If necessary, the agency should also conduct a real-world study of the proposed regulation. Most importantly, throughout its process, FMCSA must demonstrate more transparency to Congress and stakeholders. We have to keep that in mind. As the agency is funded through the Highway Trust Fund, transparency is particularly important with regard to funding for the agency's rulemaking. Though the burden of FMCSA's mission is immense, Congress must reform the agency to ensure higher levels of trust, collaboration, and ultimately more effective regulations to keep our nation's roads safe. I would now like to invite my ranking member, Senator Booker, to offer opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Senator Fischer, and I'm thrilled, frankly, to have you as the chair of this committee and know that we can have a robust partnership because we share so many of the same goals. And I think any American shares the goals of making the trucking industry, which is so vital to our nation's economy, not just good and not just meeting minimum standards, but frankly, see what we can do to make it even more robust as a more central aspect of our economy. And this is why I share with my chair a number of strong feelings, from figuring out ways to look at technology and how that can aid and impact and improve the industry, to even looking at substantive ways to improve our infrastructure so that the industry and consumers and all of us reap the benefit. Trucking simply is just a vital component to our transportation network, and I look forward to doing everything possible to supporting an effort to make sure that goods are shipped efficiently and safely throughout the entire distribution network. On my state alone, it's very critical because it provides over 180,000 jobs and contributes upwards of $700 million in state and federal taxes. That is a good thing. Now, with all of that importance and all the opportunities to seize, there are still serious issues about truck safety. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today and working with my chair to get to the bottom of a lot of very key issues and questions. We all know what happened in New Jersey last year that brought a lot of this into the spotlight. It was one high-profile accident that occurred, killing one person and injuring several others. According to the NTSB preliminary report on the accident, the truck was traveling 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, and the driver was very close to hitting his daily hours of service limit. There have also been reports that the driver may have been awake for more than 24 hours. This accident brought a flurry of media attention, but we all know this is just one example of so many heartbreaking accidents that involve trucks and the incredible impact they have in devastating people's lives, as well as costing the greater public tremendous cost. I live in the Northeast Corridor, and this is where New Jersey resides. It's home to one of the most heavily traveled stretches of highway in the country. Each year nationally, nearly 4,000 people are killed in truck crashes and over 100,000 people are injured. That is unacceptable to every American. From 2009 to 2012, truck crash injuries increased by 40%, and fatalities increased by 16%. This is absolutely unacceptable. This cannot simply be the cost of doing business. We shouldn't just resign ourselves to this harsh and difficult and tragic reality. There are steps that we can take, reasonable steps, common sense steps that we can take to address this. There is no place on our roads for tired truckers, and I applaud the Department of Transportation for working to overcome, working really for over a decade to overcome challenges that result in fatigue. The rule that we put in place was a compromise and a balanced vital safety objectives. I was against an appropriation rider that was added, frankly, to strip some of those enforcement rules. We must focus on making sure that we are doing the right thing for safety. I have also other concerns, which I hope we will get to as well. There are concerns about the longer and heavier trucks on our road, the minimum insurance levels, and even driver pay, just to name a few. But I want to thank the Chair Fischer for calling this hearing, and I really look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how we can address these issues and achieve our common goals and aspirations, not only in the Senate, but really aspirations that are common for all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booker. I do thank you for your comments. You and I share many of the same goals, and I know that we can work together and reach a compromise that's going to make our roads safer and also use common sense measures so that we don't penalize businesses when they're providing a service and are providing a safe service.
Yeah,
so I look
I
forward to
wore my
that.
red tie today.
I appreciate that. Go Big Red. So, next, I would like to welcome the panel. I will give the introductions, and then we'll start with your information that you have for us. First, we have Mr. Scott Darling III. Mr. Darling is the acting administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration in the U.S. Department of Transportation. Next, Mr. Joseph Comey.
Correct.
Mr. Comey is the Deputy Principal Assistant Inspector General for Auditing and Evaluation in the Office of Inspector General. Ms. Susan Fleming. Ms. Fleming is the Director of the U.S. Government Accountability Office. And the Honorable Christopher Hart. Mr. Hart is the Acting Chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Welcome to you all. And Mr. Darling, if you would start with your comments, please.
Good morning, Chairman Fischer and Ranking Member Booker. Oh, I'm sorry. Good morning, Chairman Fischer and Ranking Member Booker and members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to be here today with you to discuss the Grow America Act and truck and bus safety. Safety is the Department of Transportation's top priority. Since FMCSA was established 15 years ago, the number of lives lost in large truck and bus-related crashes has decreased 24%. While this represents significant progress, more must be done. Because this is my first appearance before you, let me offer you my vision. Simply put, I want every bus driver to transport their passengers safely and every truck driver to make their run safely before returning home to their families. To achieve FMCSA's safety mission to reduce crashes and fatalities involving commercial motor vehicles, we are guided by three core principles. First, to raise the bar to entry into the motor carrier industry. Second, to require high safety standards to remain in the industry. And third, to remove high-risk carriers and drivers from our roadways. We know there is no one-size-fits-all approach to overseeing more than 500,000 interstate motor carriers and almost 6 million commercial motor vehicle drivers that operate on our roadways. That is why provisions in the Grow America Act are crucial to enhancing our enforcement tools and streamlining our grants programs. We look to these proposals to give us and our law enforcement partners increased flexibility to tailor funding to conditions on the ground. The Act builds on FMCSA's continued motor carrier safety efforts by, 1, expanding locations where inspections may occur, and 2, employing more effective investigation methods and strengthening the agency's oversight authority. The Grow America Act will also allow us to prosecute motor carriers that knowingly and willingly violate an imminent hazard out-of-service order issued to protect the traveling public from harm. Because enforcement is important, we are working to focus our limited resources on identifying unsafe carriers from the vast majority of safe ones. One of the key tools in our toolbox is the Compliance, Safety, and Accountability Program, or CSA. CSA features the Safety Measurement System, or SMS, that helps us prioritize carriers for enforcement interventions. The idea is to intervene with an at-risk carrier to bring them into compliance with safety regulations or take them off the road before a crash occurs. We have been working with our stakeholders to make sure that CSA and SMS data is thorough and complete. Finally, we have a number of key safety initiatives underway to ensure that commercial truck and bus drivers are medically fit and free of alcohol and drugs. Nearly 40,000 health professionals today are listed on the National Registry of Certified Medical Examiners. We are well underway towards establishing a drug and alcohol clearinghouse to help carriers ensure that drivers they employ are compliant and safe. We will also soon publish a final rule on electronic logging devices to reduce paperwork and improve efficiency for both carriers and law enforcement officers at the roadside. Thank you, Chairman Fischer and Ranking Member Booker, for this opportunity to be here today. I look forward to having a full and open discussion with you and my fellow panelists about the common sense ways we can work towards improving highway safety and saving lives. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Darling. Mr. Comey.
Chairman Fischer, Ranking Member Booker, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. I will focus on three things. First, what the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has done and what it still needs to do to address our work in the IG's office on the Compliance, Safety, Accountability Program, or CSA. Second, challenges with addressing reincarnated carriers. And third, our ongoing work to bolster FMCSA's enforcement of motor carrier safety regulations. CSA is intended to target enforcement interventions such as on-site reviews on higher-risk motor carriers. CSA's success depends in part on complete correct data reporting from the carriers and the states. We reported last March that about half of roughly 800,000 carriers had not updated their data between January 2011 and February 2013 as required. To respond to this long-standing concern on carrier-reported data, FMCSA began to automatically take action against carriers for not updating their data, and by April 2014, the agency had deactivated over 20,000 U.S. DOT numbers for carriers with outdated data. Information systems play a key role in CSA's operations. In response to weaknesses we identified, such as incomplete documentation for CSA's IT validation and testing processes, FMCSA developed complete system requirements and a configuration management plan. However, sustained attention in this area is important to ensure effective control as staff turns over and systems change. Despite these actions, timely and effective implementation of enforcement interventions within CSA remains a challenge, largely due to delays in developing CSA's intervention software. At the time of our March 2014 report, only 10 states had implemented all interventions, and FMCSA does not expect to fully deploy the intervention software needed until 2016, more than 3 years past the first estimated release date. In the meantime, the extent to which FMCSA and its state partners can monitor and correct higher-risk carriers will be reduced. In regards to reincarnated carriers, these carriers, who often use aliases or different business addresses to evade out-of-service orders and other enforcement actions, continue to be a concern. A number of our criminal investigations have prompted legal action and resulted in jail time and fines, but there are legal and procedural barriers to prosecuting cases. For example, one reincarnated carrier case was recently declined for prosecution because the criminal penalty related to the Title 49 violation being charged was only a misdemeanor provision, which is less likely to result in jail time. The improper use of third parties to complete applications for DOT authority may also present complications to prosecution. To detect higher-risk carriers before they reincarnate, FMCSA has tested new screening tools, and it plans to roll out an enhanced process to vet applicants for federal operating authority. Timely implementation of an enhanced vetting process will help FMCSA more efficiently identify and, when appropriate, remove carriers. Our criminal investigators also continue to identify carriers who commit fraud and violate FMCSA's regulations in other areas. Through our partnership with FMCSA on the criminal side, we have uncovered fraud committed by household good movers and in drug and alcohol testing programs, as well as shut down illicit commercial driving license schemes. We also have audit work underway to respond to congressional mandates, including a review related to FMCSA's 34-hour restart study. Congress suspended enforcement of the restart rule and required FMCSA to conduct a study of the rule's operational safety, health, and fatigue impacts. Our office is charged with reviewing FMCSA's plans and final results for the study to ensure the review complies with the Act. Finally, Congress has directed us to assess FMCSA's mandatory compliance review process, including determining whether FMCSA's investigations are adequate to detect the violations. NTSB has raised similar concerns. This will be an important issue for us to address. This concludes my prepared statement. I'll be happy to answer any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comey. Ms. Fleming.
Madam Chairman, Ranking Member Booker, Ranking Member Nelson, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss FMCSA's efforts to conduct oversight of commercial motor carriers, and more specifically to reduce crashes, which cause thousands of injuries and fatalities each year. With over 500,000 active motor carriers on our nation's roads, FMCSA must strategically direct its resources to identify and target those carriers presenting the greatest risk for crashing in the future. Although our recent work shows that FMCSA has taken some important steps in this direction, my testimony reports on two aspects of its efforts that present serious challenges: the reliability of a key component of CSA, the Safety Measurement System, or SMS, in predicting crashes, and FMCSA's ability to determine the prevalence of chameleon carriers, carriers that use a new identity to operate illegally on the road. Let me begin with the Safety Measurement System. Two shortcomings make SMS an unreliable predictor of crashes. First, most of the safety regulations used in SMS to identify high-risk carriers were violated too infrequently to provide a meaningful association at the carrier level. Second, FMCSA does not have sufficient safety data on most carriers to compare them with other carriers and reliably assess their likelihood of a crash. About 2/3 of carriers operate fewer than 4 vehicles, and the vehicles of the carriers with small fleets were inspected too infrequently to produce reliable safety data. We believe this may be why the majority of carriers SMS identifies as having a high risk for crashing never actually crash. SMS does hold promise, however. FMCSA could improve its effectiveness by limiting its focus to carriers with more vehicles and more inspections. In other words, carriers with more safety information. In our work, we illustrate that this approach better identifies carriers that crash. We realize this would involve a trade-off. Fewer carriers would be scored with SMS, but it would produce a more reliable indicator of potential crash risk. Based on these concerns, we recommended that FMCSA revise the SMS methodology to better account for limitations we identified in carrier safety performance information. FMCSA officials did not concur with our recommendations, stating that SMS in its current state is sufficient to prioritize carriers for intervention. However, we believe that without the modifications we recommend, FMCSA will fall short of its mission established by Congress nearly 15 years ago to ensure the safety of commercial motor vehicles, drivers, and the traveling public. Now I would like to turn to chameleon carriers. FMCSA cannot readily determine the number of chameleon carriers on the road, though they present a serious danger to the public. FMCSA has established a vetting program to identify possible chameleon carriers, but only for bus operators and moving companies. FMCSA has chosen to vet these two types of carriers because they pose the highest safety and consumer protection concerns, and there are not enough resources to apply the vetting program to the much larger freight carrier population. While FMCSA's focus on these carriers limits the vetting program to a manageable number, our analysis found that of the more than 1,100 new motor carrier applicants in 2010 that had chameleon attributes, the vast majority were freight carriers, not bus and moving companies. To address chameleon carriers, we recommended a data-driven approach to its screening process. In June 2013, FMCSA began implementing a risk-based methodology that closely follows the methodology in our report. Preliminary analysis indicate that it is generally successful. In conclusion, FMCSA plays an important role in identifying and removing unsafe commercial carriers from the roadways. We agree with FMCSA that a data-driven approach is critical for accomplishing this mission. However, we do not believe the agency has developed the most effective methods for using its data to target carriers presenting the greatest safety risk. Madam Chairman, this concludes my statement. I would be pleased to answer any questions you or members of this subcommittee might have.
Thank you, Ms. Fleming. Mr. Hart.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Fischer, Ranking Member Booker, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of the National Transportation Safety Board. Far too many highway crashes involve large trucks and buses. This poses a disproportionate hazard to occupants in passenger vehicle crashes that in 2012 alone killed nearly 4,000 people and injured more than 100,000. A recent upward trend in crashes involving large trucks prompted the NTSB to include strengthening commercial truck safety on its 2015 most wanted list of the most critical changes that are needed for transportation safety. While there has been progress since the establishment of FMCSA in 1999, this death toll is completely unacceptable. The NTSB has issued 126 safety recommendations to the FMCSA, and more than half of them remain open. Their implementation would enable the FMCSA to have a more immediate and lasting effect on reducing highway deaths. Today, I will focus on 3 areas: fatigue, oversight, and technology. The NTSB has long made recommendations on reducing driver fatigue, including hours of service, electronic logging devices, diagnosis and treatment of obstructive sleep apnea, education and training, effective countermeasures, and risk management programs. We are currently investigating a major crash that the ranking member referred to last year involving a large truck near Cranberry, New Jersey, where fatigue may have been an issue. Fatigue is a contributing factor in far too many truck and bus crashes, and our research finds that it is the most frequently cited probable cause in crashes that are fatal to the driver. The NTSB has made recommendations to FMCSA's predecessors and DOT to use science-based principles to revise hours of service regulations for commercial drivers. Ensure that the rule enables drivers to obtain at least 8 hours of continuous sleep and eliminate provisions that allow splitting of sleep periods. In 2010, the FMCSA issued an NPRM to change the hours of service rule for truck drivers, but the NPRM unfortunately left passenger carrier rules unchanged. We support those provisions that are scientifically based to reduce continuous duty driving time, encourage breaks, promote nighttime sleep, and foster consistent schedules. We also support limiting use of the restart provision and require that the 34-hour restart interval include at least 2 consecutive off-duty periods during the nighttime circadian low point to increase opportunities for drivers to get adequate restorative sleep. The NTSB sees a disturbing trend of crashes involving fatigued drivers operating well in excess of hours of service limitations. We have long advocated using electronic logging devices for monitoring duty time. These enable tracking hours more effectively, preventing violations, and ensuring adequate time for restorative rest. The FMCSA must expeditiously issue the final electronic logging device rule to increase hours of service compliance for maximum safety. Regarding FMCSA oversight, many of the NTSB's investigations have identified shortcomings in FMCSA truck and bus company oversight, in which a deficient compliance review program has allowed unsafe businesses to continue operating. The 2 most important safety areas are driver performance and vehicle condition, and the FMCSA should emphasize both of these reviews. An unsatisfactory rating in either area should disqualify operators. In 2011, we recommended that the FMCSA include safety measurement rating scores in its compliance review methodology for determining a carrier's fitness to operate. DOT has long planned changes to this process and now, after long delays, predicts a rulemaking later this year. Any further delays will keep unsafe, high-risk carriers on our highways even longer, endangering the motoring public. Finally, I would like to discuss promising new technologies. Technologies such as tested and proven life-saving systems for speed limiting, forward collision warning, and electronic stability control offer significant potential for reducing crashes. We urge the DOT Secretary to direct FMCSA and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to expedite wider deployment of these technologies into commercial motor vehicles. Crashes take far too many lives and forever change even more lives. Crashes also provide unique opportunities to identify safety issues. Unfortunately, too many of the problems outlined today have caused multiple crashes over a number of years, and we keep seeing them over and over again. These must be addressed. Transportation safety is too important to continue repeating deadly mistakes, and we must do better. Thank you for inviting me today to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. We will begin with 5-minute rounds. Mr. Darling, your testimony mentioned that the FMCSA will implement changes to the CSA program in the coming months. Given that the GAO has provided recommendations on the CSA program over a year ago, and we've heard from law enforcement that they have requested scores be removed from public view, why is the agency just taking action now, and what reforms is the agency looking to make?
Thank you for your question, Chairman. I must start with saying that safety is our top priority. We believe that we need to maintain high safety standards on our highways every day. The information that is provided in the SMS data is good data. It's the data that we use to prioritize our interventions. It's data that is used by the public to make decisions every day. It's data that I've also heard from carriers that they use to improve their performance. SMS has only been in existence since 2010. We have continued to look to collaborate with industry, look to collaborate with all stakeholders as we continue to improve the data that's provided in the SMS system. We have a continuous improvement team that's in place right now that's working with all stakeholders, and it takes time to make sure that we have a system that works, and we believe we have a system that works today.
I can appreciate that government can move slowly, but we're all interested here in safety on our highways for the citizens in this country. I would ask again what reforms your agency is looking at with regards to the action being taken.
Again, I start with safety and I start with our continuous improvements. We're in the process of looking at different changes. We are not at a place today to identify changes. We have some changes that we will be implementing by the end of the year, but we're working through a process right now, and it's a collaborative process.
Do you have any specific changes you can tell us about at the hearing today?
I don't, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Also, one of the challenges on the CSA program is that it doesn't distinguish really between crashes that a trucking company may cause and also those that it doesn't cause. I think that's an important fact that we be aware of. I'm also aware that in your recent study on the limitations of using police accident reports, that makes, I think, the fault determinations. In many cases, the fault's pretty obvious, I think. Like when a bridge in Cincinnati falls on a truck, isn't that pretty glaring? It wasn't the trucker's fault? I guess I would ask you, is the agency really unable to determine that the truck didn't cause the bridge to fall on it?
We're not in a position to make that determination, Chairman. We use various information to do that. Predictability is difficult. That's why we issued our crash weighting study and put that out for comment from industry and from other stakeholders to make sure that they have input on how we look at crashes. We don't use crashes to weigh against a carrier unless we're going to change a carrier's safety rating, and then we look to causation at that point.
But you are holding it against the carrier from the get-go after a crash, is that correct?
We don't hold it against the carrier.
But if you attribute the crashes to the trucking company, isn't that a black mark against them?
We only contribute a crash against a company unless we change the safety rating of that company. That's what before we do that, that's when we look at causation.
And the causation changes the rating, correct?
No, it doesn't. We make a determination with a lot of factors before we change the rating.
But that is one of the factors?
It could be one of the factors.
Are you looking at any reforms in determining the causation of accidents?
We have our crash rating, a report that we're waiting for comment. Comment has just, will close at the end of this month, and then we'll assess those and go to looking at how do we look at crash weighting as a factor.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Senator Booker.
The ranking member,
Okay,
well,
ranking
Senator
member.
Nelson, who also has a better haircut than me. I want to say for the record.
Senator Booker is the ranking member of this subcommittee, and he's very kind, And I will just enter an opening statement in the record and just say that 4,000 deaths a year are occurring as a result of truck and bus accidents, and this is serious business. And then just to top it off, Monday, big semi plows into an SUV on the Buckman Bridge in Jacksonville, and 4 people are dead. And so it's just another reminder that we've got to take it very seriously. So I defer to the ranking member of the subcommittee, Senator Booker.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I appreciate you as ranking member coming to the committee hearing today, and your opening statement will be entered into the record. Thank you so much. Senator Booker.
Thank you, and I appreciate the ranking member of the entire committee deferring to the ranking member of the subcommittee. And it's only due, as he has whispered in my ear, that New Jersey should go before Florida on most occasions, but you have seniority in this case, so I appreciate your graciousness. Do want to dive in, if I can, to something that's been a lot of talk about over the last months, which are rules of service. And I really want to get to these. So can I start with Administrator Darling and just ask you, quite bluntly, right now, is it true that drivers can potentially be able to drive more than 80 hours a week?
The answer is yes.
And do you see that as a threat to the safety of our roads and highways?
I do see that as a threat to the safety of our roads today. I want to thank you, Ranking Member Booker, for your support of the 2011 Hours of Service Rule. The U.S. DOT and FMCSA stand behind that rule. We promulgated to save lives and protect people that we love every day who use our highways.
Thank you. No, if I may, because I've got limited time.
Yeah.
You know, earlier we heard testimony from the trucking company who said most drivers never come close to hitting the maximum weekly hours. Is that true in your estimation, that most truckers out there don't come close to that 80 hours?
There's probably a majority that do not come close to that 80 hours, but there's a potential to work 80 hours with the current rule.
And so let's be more specific and drill down. The appropriations rider that I tried to stop, how does that impact driver fatigue, that rider which suspended some of these rules?
The impact of the current rule is that with our research on the 2011 rule, we found that drivers that have 1 hour of rest are more fatigued than drivers that have 2 hours of rest. The rule that we had in 2011 was a data-driven rule that was backed up by research and studies.
So data-driven research studies, be more specific. Did you just sort of read an article in the New York Times and come to that conclusion, or what's this data-drivenness? Can you say that?
Data-driven is that we had studies that were conducted by...
How many studies?
There's probably close to 500 studies that were used in that rule, or looked at in that rule.
Right. And so this wasn't your opinion?
It's not my opinion, no.
I have a saying, God we trust, I'm a man of faith, but everybody else bring me data.
Yes.
And you're saying you have 500 studies that supported those rules?
Yeah, there was 500 studies that were reviewed as part of that study.
Okay, so when it comes to accidents, how big of a role in general could you assess for me does driver fatigue cause, as we've seen this spike, this surge in accidents? How much does driver fatigue? Is it other issues that are playing a role, or is driver fatigue a cause or a main cause? Not your opinion, but according to a lot of the studies and the data.
We put out a large truck causation study that looked at fatigue, and about 13% of the serious crashes was caused by fatigue. But remember, fatigue is hard on fatal crashes because you know, it's hard to tell if somebody has had rest or not.
So
Or taken
13%
a-
of fatalities,
Yes.
crashes involving fatalities. But remember, we have tens of thousands
Yes.
of others. Do they play a role in a significant percentage of those?
The answer to the question is we believe yes.
Can I return to Honorable Hart in the last minute that I have remaining? How do you respond to the hours of service provisions in the appropriations bill?
We encouraged, again, science-based rules that enable humans to be human, which means sleeping at night. And that's why we were very strong about having two periods of restorative sleep within the 34-hour restart based on data.
And again, why is it important that you have that restart? Because that's also, there's two concerns here. One is just working that 80 hours a week or more, which seems to, by the data, show that you begin to strain human endurance. But then number two, that restart rule is also a bit of the controversy. Could you just, my last 20 seconds here, could you explain why that restart rule is important in accordance with the data and the research of hundreds and hundreds of studies?
Based on our review of the data, 2 opportunities to have restorative sleep results in much less fatigue than only 1 opportunity for restorative sleep. That's why it was important for us to have 2 opportunities for restorative sleep within the restart period.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for holding this important hearing. Chairman Hart, I have a couple of questions for you, if I could. One, you may well remember the tragic accident we had on the Skagit River Bridge when part of I-5 collapsed.
Yes, I do remember
In
it.
2013, very shocking for people all across America to think that a bridge that transports about $38 million of trade between U.S. and Canada would collapse. So part of the NTSB's deficiencies in safeguard, one of the recommendations was to ban non-emergency use by the pilot escort vehicle. So one of the things that was determined is that the actual hit occurred, but the communication back was not communicated in a timely fashion. So you're recommending that that pilot vehicle, only if they're communicating with the car for, you know, what are we, extra wide loads.
Oversized, yes.
Oversized loads, that's the only communication that should be going on between the pilot and that vehicle.
Emergency communications in general. So in that case, the escort car, actually there was an impact of the pole with the bridge, but the escort driver was on the phone at the time, and you know, that fact of the pole hitting the bridge was not communicated to the following truck.
And now Washington State DOT has a $17 million lawsuit against the truck driver, the company, the pilot car company, the owner of the truck car, all of that, because somebody was talking on the phone. So anyway, want to follow up on that recommendation. And also, because you're here, and you had a blog, I understand, about this. We had a hearing, I think that was yesterday, on this issue of rail car safety, and that part of your 2005 most wanted list of improvements, particularly in light of what happened in Virginia. Do you believe that we need to, that actually these cars that are out there to replace the 111s aren't really that great, and that we need a thicker hull?
We have several accidents recently involving the newer cars, the 1232 cars, including one in Canada, and we're reviewing them closely to determine whether the additional robustness is actually producing a positive result in the real world.
But you have doubts about that.
Well, we are seeing enough concerns, like in Lynchburg, the train was going less than 25 miles an hour and still breached a 1232 car. So we have concerns, and we are collecting evidence based on the accidents about all those cars.
So you think a thicker shell, thicker hull?
Well, it's a multiple approach, including the thickness of the shell. We don't specify the specific thickness. We just say the robustness needs to be improved, but also thermal protection, so that a car won't be engaged in that a fire from another car won't cause, you know, other cars to explode, and it's a multifaceted issue.
Besides the 1232 thickness.
Yeah, so there's the head-end protection, there's the thickness, there's the thermal protection. It's a multifaceted issue.
But we need more thickness than 1232s.
Well, that's what we're trying to find out. We have only a few, you know, we have a very small end so far, and we're trying to determine whether the thickness was the problem.
Okay. I believe that we need more thickness. So anyway, okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Because the panel's here and willing, I assume we'll do another round of questions. And I will begin. Ms. Fleming, FMCSA plans to issue a proposed rule to assign safety fitness ratings to motor carriers based on data and scores from its CSA scoring system. And I know that GAO issued a 2014 report on CSA, which highlighted a number of problems and deficiencies. Since safety ratings determine whether carriers can operate in interstate commerce, do you believe that the CSA produces sufficiently reliable scores on which to base safety fitness ratings?
We have not seen the rulemaking, but a lot of it depends on the information that is going to be used for making those determinations. If SMS scores are a part of that, our work shows that they don't do an accurate job of reflecting a carrier's crash risk. So it really goes back to the purpose. It's sufficient for for FMCSA and law enforcement to target interventions, but we have problems when it is being displayed publicly, when the information does not, it's not reliable enough to compare safety performance across carriers. So I think that's the main thrust of our concern.
And can you provide this subcommittee with information regarding that audit of the 2014 Hours of Service field study? And what are some of the highlights of your work on that?
Unfortunately, that is ongoing work that is for you and for the colleagues over on transportation infrastructure. We'd be happy to brief you, but in a nutshell, we do have an ongoing study looking at hours of service. It's two aspects of it. We are looking at the strength and limitations of the completed field study, the efficacy of the rule, particularly looking at the two nighttime provisions. And then we're also looking at some of the potential impacts of the rule on safety, health, and the economy. And we do plan to report out this summer on that.
But you would be willing to brief us prior
Absolutely.
to reporting out? Thank
Absolutely.
you. And Mr. Comey, ensuring that drivers properly attain their CDLs, I think that's a major effort in promoting safety. Can you tell us about the update on any successes or challenges that you're seeing with CDL fraud investigations?
Thank you. We have not conducted any audit work, but we do continue to work to combat CDL fraud. I know recently we had a case where there was owners of a driver school in New York where there was a test taking scheme to provide answers to an estimated 500 applicants, and in that case we were able to obtain a conviction. It continues to be a problem that relates to sometimes, as in this case, the actual people giving the test. Sometimes it's third-party testers who are involved with bringing people to the test themselves, and we've seen gadgets such as Bluetooth and pencils with coding in them used to try to get around these tests.
Can Congress do anything to help you with that?
I don't know of any specific, legislative issues we're concerned with on the CDL side. It's just continues to be, an active part of our investigations.
Thank you. Senator Booker.
I'm going to try to do a speed round here to get all my questions in. So just real quick, in some great conversations I've had with the trucking industry, looking for areas of compromise, they are insistent that most drivers don't go over 80 hours. Mr. Darling, wouldn't it just be easier then if that's the case? Let's make a hard rule. Nobody drives over 80 hours. Is that an easy way of looking for solutions to deal with this?
I don't believe that's an easy way to deal with this. I think the rule that we had in place, Senator Booker, in 2011, dealt with allowing truckers to have adequate time to work, but also to have adequate time and opportunity for rest. I think that we need to continue moving forward with the safety rule that we had in place in
Okay, so
2011.
you think the restart rule is important?
I think the restart rule is very important.
Okay. And sir, just, are there other things that we should be considering as solutions to deal with driver fatigue besides 80-hour limiting hours and restart rule? Are there some other things about driver fatigue that we should be considering?
I believe the study that we're going to do, or we're currently engaged in, will help us understand some more of those opportunities to allow drivers to have additional rest.
Thanks, Mr. Darn. I'm going to cut you off just because, Mr. Hart, anything else we should be considering? And I do think that the current 500th and whatever study we're doing right now, as Mr. Fleming talked about, but are there other things as quick ideas that you might want to give the committee about ways to deal with driver fatigue?
Thank you for the question. Electronic logging is very important so we will have with certainty an indication of the hours that were driven. But we also know that what the driver does off-duty, we have no control over that. So that's why fatigue management programs are so important, because we know that self-diagnosis of fatigue is not reliable. Fatigue management includes education of the people to help them diagnose their own fatigue. Also, obstructive sleep apnea evaluations are very important because we're seeing an increasing incidence of that as well. So it's a multitude of issues that we're looking at.
That's great. Senator Fischer and I are thinking about mandating watching C-SPAN because we think it'll put drivers to sleep. Real quickly, as the truck accident that was just mentioned by my ranking member, these big accidents can cost over $20 million to compensate family, care for the injured, the destruction that happens on highways of these explosions often. But the thing that is surprising to me to have found out is that the requirement is to carry $750,000 in minimum insurance. That has not been increased in 30 years, even though the cost of these to all of us is so dramatically high. It doesn't even account for inflation. And so taxpayers are fitting this bill. It's an externality, a really negative externality is put onto the public. I'm wondering, Administrator Darling, FMCSA issued a report recognizing the current minimum insurance level is inadequate. What steps can Congress take in transportation reauthorization to reduce the unfair economic burden that truck crashes place on the American people?
Right now, we have a advance notice of proposed rulemaking out, which is a data gathering. I think once we gather that data from that advanced rulemaking, we'll have more information. Remembering that the minimum requirements, insurance requirements, are 30 years old, and we want to make sure that we look at it. So I'd like to wait until we have an opportunity to review the advance notice of proposed rulemaking before we take any more action.
All right, and that will bring me to my last just line of questioning for now, which is the speed at which we're doing things. And I know you're just the acting member, but in the last Surface Transportation Reauthorization, Congress required that the final rule mandating something called electric logging devices on trucks be issued by October 13th. It was nearly a year and a half ago. I was still just a happy mayor, had not come down here yet. Just tell me, why is this important safety rule so far behind? We're talking about urgent things that can make a life or death difference. And is this these kind of things being put into a high priority?
Thank you for that question, and that's a good question. The electronic logging device rule is a high priority because it is a safety rule. As Chairman Hott talked about, it will help with understanding hours of service. We have made it a priority in my agency, and we will get that rule, final rule out and published by the end of this fiscal year. Okay, and I just want to say, as I conclude, and I know that I can imagine that the chairman agrees with me, there are a lot of just things languishing and overdue in FMCSA, rules that have been required by congressional statute. It's something that I want to take a look at in trying to get the agency to keep up with the urgency and the mandates of Congress. It's just very important. Right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Senator Booker. He's from New Jersey. You can get a lot of questions in because he speaks quickly. Being from Nebraska, we're a little slower, but I expect great things from Minnesota. So, Senator Klobuchar.
Very good. Yes, we'll go to the Midwestern pace now. It's so good to see all of you. Thank you for your good work. Ms. Fleming, the GAO's 2014 report regarding the Compliance, Safety, and Accountability Program pointed to a number of changes that need to happen in order to make the program more effective and reliable. The report states, for safety measurement system to be effective in identifying carriers more likely to crash, the violations that the FMCSA uses to calculate SMS scores should have a strong predictive relationship with crashes. However, based on GAO's analysis of available information, most regulations used to calculate the scores are not violated often enough to strongly associate them with crash risk for individual carriers. What specific changes would you recommend be made to improve the correlation between the scores and the crash risk?
Well, I think that gets to the heart of our report, which is that you need additional safety information. We found two problems with the SMS scores. One, that they don't accurately capture the carrier's risk, and that's because there isn't a lot of safety information for the majority of carriers. And then the problem is that we were not able to make a statistical link between the violations and predict whether a carrier is likely to crash in the future. So what we were able to do is, and I thank you for that question because it gets me to address some of the concerns that FMCSA has with our work, is we were able to try to produce more reliable scores. Our approach basically said instead of just the 3 to 5 inspections, we're going to try to use more safety information. We're going to use additional inspections in vehicles. And our work found that by just doing that, we were able to identify 2/3 of high-risk carriers that crash in the future compared to the methodology that FMCSA is currently using, which only identified 1/3.
That's a big change.
It's a big change, and yes, it involves trade-offs. It involves maybe scoring less carriers, but, and I think that's the point that my colleague makes, which is that we would only score 10%, but I think it's important to note that the current approach only scores 20% of all carriers. So by just doing some additional, collecting some more additional information, you're able to target FMCSA's limited resources to those carriers that truly pose the highest risk of crashing.
Okay, thank you very much for that thorough answer. Mr. Darling, the sharp decline in traffic enforcement triggered truck inspections in the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program that has resulted in far fewer violations being reported. My concern is that fewer traffic enforcement inspections means fewer traffic enforcement violations are going into the unsafe driving basic in the CSA. And would allocating more enforcement resources lead to improved truck safety? Do you think that would make a difference?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. We are working hard to have more traffic enforcement. That's one of the tools we have in the toolbox to deal with safety and to manage risk. We've been working hard to include more truck safety. Truck enforcement. We believe that's one way of getting to, as you mentioned, getting to unsafe driving. We have in our Grow America proposal provisions in the state grant programs that allow grant recipients to use that money for traffic enforcement. We're conducting training currently on traffic enforcement, and we also have a grant with the International Chiefs of Police to help us think about that issue. But traffic enforcement is one of the tools that we have that we believe it's an important tool. The other tool being inspections and being interventions.
Okay, well, I'm almost out of time here, but I have a few questions I'll just put on the record.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Daines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Administrator Darling, a question. When I was a member of the House, I authored and passed an amendment to the Transportation Appropriations Bill that was going to block the efforts to increase financial responsibility requirements for motor carriers. These increased requirements would be up to a 500% increase and would send premiums skyrocketing despite the DOT's own data that showed that the current requirements cover 99.9% of the accident costs. And we were doing some research on the Fed Register, and this policy, going back in history, was established by the Federal Highway Administration in 1980, where, and I quote, it said, "Congress's intent for reasonable protection did not include those damages incurred as a result of an extremely limited number of worst-case accidents." So the question, given that the current policy covers 99.9% of accident costs, why is the agency departing from this original policy?
We're not departing, Senator, from the original intent. We have put out a advance notice of rulemaking that looks to collect data about the financial responsibility from the stakeholders. That is currently out, and we're currently analyzing the comments that we're going to receive from that. I go back to the point that the minimum financial responsibility requirements were put in place in 1980. It's now 2015, and it may be an opportunity for us to take a look at it.
Well, there were discussions about where this proposed rule may create up to a 500% increase for our carriers, when again 99.9% of the current accident costs are covered under existing policy. My concern is what I see here is the primary beneficiary of these increased liability and requirements here for our motor carriers is going to be the trial lawyers. That's who's going to benefit the most.
Senator, thank you again. We have not made any decisions on financial responsibility. Again, I go back to we're in a data collection period. We'd like to collect the data. We need to analyze the comments that we received from the advance notice of proposed rulemaking. It's not a proposed notice of rulemaking. It's advanced. It means that we're collecting data to determine where we go next and how we proceed next.
Okay. Let me move on to a separate area. Yesterday we had Secretary Fox, had a good hearing with him, and we were probing around why there were so many acting administrators in major operating agencies in the Department of Transportation. And he said they're looking for the right fit,
Yes.
And they had good leaders in place. And you've been the acting administrator since August of 2014. It's my understanding that your term as acting administrator ends in just 19 days, March 23rd. What's the contingency plan after March 23?
I currently serve at the will of the President, and I have 19 days left. I believe, it's my understanding that the administration is vetting some candidates for the position. We will look to have adequate administrative support going forward after my term is over. Mm-hmm. So we will have somebody in place to run the agency.
Has the President given you an indication, one of you, to be nominated for that position, or someone else? Do you have any sense? 19 days left.
Right.
Hopefully we've got some visibility there.
Yes, there is some visibility there, and I believe the administration is looking at candidates. And I only serve at the will of the President and the administration.
Thank you. You back my time.
Thank you, Senator Daines. With that, the hearing record will remain open for 2 weeks. During that time, senators are asked to submit any questions for the record. Upon receipt, the witnesses are requested to submit their written answers to the committee as soon as possible. I thank the witnesses for appearing today. Thank you so much. The hearing is closed.
Thank you very much.